Grandpa, do you remember that story you told in the car about getting that guy's dentures?
What was that again?
The story you told about Priest Lake and you got that guy's dentures out of the water?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They were. Oh, I kid you not. When I dove down that one time, and where that old man told me they probably drifted over in that way. Boy, he hit it right on the nail.
Yeah.
And I went down, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden, I see somebody smiling at me. Those white teeth were just a smiling at me. And there they were. And so I brought him up, and was the guy glad to get him.
Why did he need his teeth
And-
again?
Huh?
Why did he need his teeth again?
Why? How did he lose them? Huh?
Yeah, how did he lose them?
He started out skiing from the dock, and he got out of ways, and he fell, and he hit the water hard
Yeah.
with his face, and his teeth come out. And that's why he lost his teeth. And then my friend who was with him, he knew I did skin diving with tanks. So he called me up. And believe it or not, oh, that's right. Really, here's the rest of the story. I didn't tell you the rest of the story. By the time I got out to Priest Lake, it was at Priest Lake.
Yeah.
By the time I got out there, it was dark. It turned dark. So what do? I have to take a flashlight. I put it in a fruit jar and tighten the lid so the flashlight would be in the fruit jar and it would still shine,
Yeah.
even though it was flooded.
Yeah.
And so I was going down with a flashlight, mind you, looking for those teeth. And at first, like I said, I started looking right where everybody said, well, he fell right there. He fell right there.
Yeah.
That's where he fell, right there. And then here comes this old guy. He came while I was down, and I come back to the dock, and I says, God, I'm having a hell of a time. I can't find those teeth. And that old guy standing there, he said, well, if I was you, I would look over here, because the water drips this way, he said. He says, so I look over there.
Yeah.
By golly, he hit it right on the head.
Oh, man.
I went down where he said, and it was in about 70 foot of water.
Really?
70 foot. Yep.
70 feet?
Because right there, the water went down just like that. The shore went down just
You
like
dove
that.
70 feet.
It's about 70 foot of water. When I got, that's when I just headed out, and I was following the bottom,
Yeah.
and it was just dropping, just like that.
Yeah.
And I was going down, and the guy fell out quite a ways from shore. So that's why I say, it was between. Let me put it this way, though I didn't measure the water.
You mean 70 feet out from the shore or 70 feet down?
I didn't measure the water. I think it could have been between 50 to 70 foot. Could have been
Wow.
between the two. 70 foot was no, that wasn't a really deep dive. You have to know how to break your ears when you go that deep. You know how to break your ears?
How do I break my ears?
You got to break them about every 20 foot. You got to break them. If you don't, you reach a point you cannot go any deeper unless you break your ears. And the only way to break your ears to swallow air, not breathe it. You had to put it in your mouth.
Yeah.
You had to break. You had to
And you
break
had to
it.
do this underwater?
It's underwater. You're
Wow.
doing it
So
underwater.
you ended up doing that like 3 or 4 times on the way down, right?
About 2 times or 3 times. Each plateau you reach where you have to stop. You can't go below that plateau if you don't pop your ears. You can't go below that plateau. So I went to the first one, and I stopped and I broke my ears. Then I went down to the second, and I broke my ears. It was after I only did it twice. And after the second time I broke my ears, that's when I was going down further, and all of a sudden, a great big smile from the bottom of the lake was just a grinning at me, as though, you dumb son of a gun, what are you doing down here? That's what they said to me. Anyway, I brought him up, and I really thought he was chintzy, because he only gave me $20 to what I did, because
What would that be comparable to with inflation?
today
Yeah.
it would be probably comparable to about $50, 50 or 60.
That's not too bad then.
No, it isn't too bad, but
But
after all,
the
after
cost
all,
of-
I used all the gas, my gas, to drive, you know, how far we drove today up and back.
Yeah. You probably
used
just
my
spent
gas.
gas alone.
Huh?
You probably just spent that on gas alone then.
Yeah, I used my gas, and of course, my air tanks, I didn't use much air out in my air tanks. And so consequently, that's why he called me the friend. This guy that I found his teeth for didn't even know me.
Yeah.
He didn't know me, but he was with this close friend of mine who I worked with I sold shoes. He knew I was doing, delving and diving.
Yeah. When did
I
you
was
start
doing
skin
that.
diving?
What?
When did you start skin diving?
Oh gosh, when the kids were all small. Terry wasn't born then yet. When Don and Ron were probably 10 and 12, somewhere in there, 12.
So you were
And-
in your 40s?
Huh?
You were in your 40s?
No, if you take 10 and 12 away from 20, I was discharged at 22. And you take 34.
Okay.
34, 35, that's when I did it.
Okay.
And that's when, matter of fact, one time, it was Cherry's mother. I was diving at Liberty Lake, and I went down, and I was using the buddy system there. And we went down, and all of a sudden I developed a nosebleed. The guy tapped me on the shoulder, and he pointed. I didn't know what he was pointing at. And I looked my head down, and I looked up, and blood all over my goggles. So I headed for shore. But he took off prior to me going to shore.
Yeah.
And when he got to shore, he told Irene that Harry is out there with a mask full of blood. So guess what? I finally found, I ended up in the wrong position coming in because that's where boats were launching. So I knew I couldn't come in then, so I went back out and I circled around and come out a little further up. And when I come out of the water, I lifted my goggles like this. They were full of blood, and the blood just ran down my face and all the way down and Irene just about fainted. She just about fainted. Naturally, this would make anybody a little bit scared.
Yeah.
And especially when this guy comes back and tells her that Harry is down there with a lot of blood and he's a mask.
So why did you develop a nosebleed? Was it just?
Huh?
Was it because you were diving you developed a nosebleed?
Well, I didn't break. Evidently, I didn't break my
Ears.
yeah, it didn't stop to break. Anyway, but that's what I did out at Priest. And the shore wasn't like where we were at.
Yeah.
This place was where we were at. The cabin was up on the hillside, and it was kind of down like that. And the shore, then they had a dock right down here, but it would run right along the shore. And that's why everybody was on the dock when I was diving. There was quite a few people come when they saw me, and I went down with a flashlight, and I'm shining all over the bottom looking for these teeth. And he's, like I said, he was a salesman for one of the, I remember one of the uh, companies that run trucks for shipping stuff,
Yeah.
and he was a salesman for them. And he had to go the next morning. He was already contracted to go out. He had to go out of town the next morning, and he couldn't leave without his teeth. And so he was in a spot. He was really in a spot. That's what convinced me. Otherwise, I would have never went up there at that time of night. But he was in a spot, and I'm a salesman. At that time I was a salesman. And I know what it would be like to try to go out. Well, ma'am, I know what it had been like. So I was drawn out there with that reason in mind, and being a salesman itself. And that's, I kid you not, that bottom really, it dropped just like that. Oh man, did it go down? Did it go down? That's why I can't tell you how deep I was. I say between 50 and 70 foot is about where it was, where the teeth were. And I'll never forget that big smile I got from those teeth. There they were. They landed just perfectly on the bottom. That they weren't upside down. They were right side up, and like they were biting the mud on the bottom. And there they were, just a smiling at me, just as big as you please. What a smile they had on their face. And that's why I was out there in the dark. I was going down in the dark, looking for teeth with a flashlight in a fruit jar. A flashlight in a fruit jar. Go along that dead tree, pulling off all kinds of jackwhites and some fishing gear off of that tree stump. But a lot of it was on this tree stump for so long, it got a little bit rusty, even though it was. Then I found a gun once.
Really?
Yeah, I found a pistol, but it was so rusty. The place where you put your finger through was all rusted shut. You couldn't even get your finger through between where the trigger was. It was so rusted shut. So
It's probably the mafia's gun.
probably you're right. It might have been that guy who lost his teeth. He might have lost that gun too. Anyway, I found all kinds of junk I used to find. And I told you what I found mostly, did I?
No.
I thought I told you. I found a lot of hot water tanks.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah, a lot of hot water tanks. You see, when people went to electric water heating equipment, they took out a wood stove, which they had a lot. Most all the people around Liberty Lake at one time. That's all they had is wood stoves and a big hot water tank. Well, pretty quick electricity came in, and they'd take out that hot water tank and the wood stove and put in electric. So the water tank then had no value to them. So they'd take them out in the lake, in the middle of the lake with their boat, and they pull the plug on them and they let them sink. Well, of all things, when I was skin diving, I come across so many old hot water tanks, I couldn't believe it at the number of hot water tanks that I came across. And it was because people were people were terrible. And then I told you about one time I was swimming along and I come across a neat pile of cans and bottles and stuff like that. And I swam around that pile saying to myself, how could anybody dump out of their boat, out of a sack, all their bottles and cans of stuff, and they end on a neat pile in the bottom, especially since when you dump them, they float all over the lake before they go down. They don't go into a nice neat pile. So that threw me until I swam around it for a bit and I finally figured it out. I saw underneath the stack a gunny sack was underneath. So what they did do, they took a gunny sack full of bottles and cans and such, and they had tied it shut, and they threw it in the water and put a rock in the bottom, and it went down, and it stayed there until the sack rotted away, and it left a nice neat pile of cans and bottles and stuff.
That's funny.
So you see, Wes, what I found as found a lot of old tires. I'll tell you, the tires, some of them were half burnt because what happened, people would use old tires to go out and fish on the lake, and they'd use them to start a fire on the end of them. And then when it wouldn't even get them off the lake when they were done fishing, they left those tires there, and then they sank straight down when I saw it. And these tires are laying on the bottom of the lake, and I could see some of them were partially burnt.
They would burn tires?
Huh?
They would burn tires? Doesn't burning tires
They were
smell
burning
bad?
them to keep warm while they were ice fishing.
Well, a lot of ice skating too.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So anyway, I was surprised to find a lot of that in the bottom of the lake.
Wow.
I found all kinds of garbage like that. In those days, it was amazing. This was probably in the 40s and the 50s, how people were terrible about dumping in the lake.
You know what? That reminds me, down where we went camping near Fort Bragg in California, there's a beach called Glass Beach.
Yeah.
And it's called Glass Beach because back in probably about the 40s, they
Yeah.
dumped their garbage into the
Their
ocean.
bottles.
And so there's still pieces of
Yeah.
colored glass, and it was kind of cool. We went several years ago, and the beach has kind of changed now, and the tide was up, so we couldn't get down. But down in the rocks, there's like pieces of things that have gotten, caught like in the rocks, and then it erodes. And anyway, there was all kinds of, you could just find odd pieces of garbage stuck in the rocks, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I
Kind
remember
of
doing that.
disgusting too, but kind of cool, kind of cool what,
Wes,
Mother Nature
I ask a lot of people,
did with all
where
the
did
garbage.
Wes go?
I'm in the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
I have asked a lot of people, how could a neat bottle of bottles and cans and stuff be in such a nice, neat pile? Nobody has ever come up with an answer that
Well,
has figured that
You
out.
don't tell them about the sack underneath.
Huh?
You don't tell them about the sack underneath.
I should, I don't tell them until I ask them first.
Yeah.
How do you think those cans of bottles got in such a neat pile?
Oh, there's so
Because
bad.
if you dump a sack of cans of bottles in the water, they float in all directions.
So much
Yeah.
for I ate
And
a
they
small
sink
dinner and went
all
swimming
over.
at the high school
See,
cash.
they don't sink in a neat pile. That isn't the way they sink. So that's why it took me a little bit to figure it out myself. When I saw that can, that sack, I started digging a little bit under it, then I saw the sack, the old garbage sack, the old gunny sack, burlap gunny sack underneath. And then I knew what to do. And then there usually was a big stone in the middle of it underneath. And that's what they would do. They'd take a stone, put it in the bottom of the sack, put all their cans and stuff in, take and go out to the lake with their boat, drop it in the water. The rock would take them straight down, and then the sack would rot away. over the years. See?
Wow.
Wesley, how long does it take you to dry your hair?
It depends on things. Yeah, the weather, the humidity.
Do you
If we're
have
by
to
the
dry it, like if you shower and then going somewhere, do you have to use a dryer?
no, I usually just use a towel and then let
Let it go.
the air do the rest. Yeah. Let the
You
air.
don't see too many people that have that pretty kinky curly hair.
I know.
Yeah.
You don't.
Mine isn't as curly as his.
Well, sweetheart, I think we better
I mean, that's a lot of
go to
curl.
bed.
Yeah.
I wanna go to bed and figure out a way to catch Bigfoot.
Sleep on it, Grandpa.
You know, dream
Okay.
about
You
catching
should dream
Bigfoot.
about it.
I'll catch him with
Probably
a
catch
jar
him in your dreams.
flashlight.
You'll
Okay,
probably
Grandpa.
catch him in your dreams.
I'll catch him in my dreams.